Now we are in the nervous system and the nervous tissue. The first chapter is going to talk about the divisions of the nervous system and the types of cells we have there. Also, we will see functions of the nervous system. So there are several ways to classify the nervous system. The first way is looking at the regions. So we have two major regions of the nervous system: the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, and there is the peripheral nervous system, which we can say it's everything else. So we have the brain and the spinal cord. These are the central nervous system, whereas the peripheral nervous system is all of these nerves and the ganglion. We will understand what is ganglion later, but you can think of the peripheral nervous system is everything in the body except the brain and the spinal cord. You can think that the brain and the spinal cord are in the midline of the body, whereas anything away from that is peripheral nervous system. Function-wise, there are two major functions of the nervous system. The first one, there are the basic functions that are regarding sensation, integration, and response. Then there are functions related to the control of the body. And these later we are going to see them, the somatic or autonomic division, that they can define the status of the body, and there are certain structures that involve in either or both one of these systems. So before going into this is maybe in the following chapters. Let's start with the basic functions of the nervous system. So as it says here, there is the sensation, integration, and response. Sensation, it means receiving information about the environment. So in order to develop an input or together, or you can think of it as gathering information about the environment. Whether this is inside the body or outside. So outside, like for example, the temperature of water. Inside, if you have, for example, pain or high blood sugar. All of these are types of information that are going to be collected or sensed by the nervous system. So this is the function of the nervous system. Now, usually this is happening through the peripheral nervous system. Okay, but there are certain areas in our body but there are certain areas in the central nervous system that can do sensation as well. These information need to be, as they are gathered, they need to be sent in order to be analyzed. Usually that is the integration, and usually this is happening in the CNS, in the central nervous system. So all of the information gathered will be sent to the CNS, either the brain or spinal cord, for analysis. Right? So in this, back to this example, if you decide that the water is cold, you are going to move your hand and increase the temperature or increase the amount of hot water that's coming through. So all of this was a decision that is made in the central nervous system. Then there is the motor output, which is the response itself for this information. So this is going to go back, as we saw in the muscle chapter, they are going to go through usually motor neurons, if they are for muscles. And in this case here, these muscles receive the signal that you need to increase the amount of hot water coming through. So that is also a motor output function and that is related also to the nervous system. Now, for controlling the body, very briefly, as I said, we are going to talk about it in the coming chapters. We have something called somatic nervous system. This is responsible for conscious perception and voluntary motor responses. So usually this is for skeletal muscles. And there is the autonomic nervous system, which is usually responsible for the involuntary control of the body, also responsible for the homeostasis, like body temperature, blood sugar, blood pressure. All of this is happening through autonomic nervous system. These are the two functions or the two parts of the nervous system that are responsible for controlling the body: somatic and autonomic nervous system. Let's see now the nervous tissue. In nervous tissue, we have two types of cells. We have the neurons and we have the glial cells. Neurons are the main cells of nervous system. They are responsible for communication. So all of the orders, all of the information transmitted from sensory to integration to motor, this information will be carried by neurons. All of the orders from the motor to the muscles, for example, or to the glands, all also are carried by neurons. So these are the most important cells of the nervous system, the neurons. Glial cells are supporting cells, and we will see several of them. They are helping the neurons to perform their function. Let's start with the neuron and let's see the structure of the neurons. Here we have the cell body. This is the cell body, or sometimes they are calling it the soma. It contains the nucleus and it contains other organelles. From the body there are these extensions. These extensions are called dendrites. These extensions are called dendrites. And these dendrites, they work as receptors. They receive, as you can see here, they receive information from either other neurons or other structures. So receptors for information. Receptors for information. These are the dendrites. Also, from the cell body, there is something called the axon. And the axon, as you can see, it's a long extension from the cell body. It's a long extension from the cell body. Axon usually will end in something called axon terminals, the same one we saw in the muscle chapter. Okay, and these axon terminals, they will form synapse. And we will talk a little bit about them later as well. They are going to form synapse with dendrites of another neuron. For example, in this particular example, since they draw already a neuron, could be muscle, could be a gland as well. So not necessarily a neuron, but all of them are going to call them synapse. Okay, so we have the cell body, the dendrites, we have the axon and the axon terminal. All of these are components of the neuron. Now, one thing I did not mention is the axon hillock. This is the area where the axon exiting from the cell body. Usually, this is the area responsible for generates action potential. So the action potential would start here, and later we will see that it will travel all the way to the synapse. Types of neurons. There are several ways that we can classify neurons. The first way is the structural classification, and this is based on the number of processes attached to the cell body. What does this mean? It means that in this example, this is a unipolar neuron. We have a cell body, and here there is one extension from the cell body. So this is unipolar. Unipolar. There is only one extension of the cell body. So this is the axon, and this axon would like kind of a branch. One side is the dendrites, and the other side is the axon terminal. All of these are sensory neurons. It means that they are collecting information and sending it to the central nervous system. All of them. The second type is bipolar neuron. Bipolar neuron. Why? We have the cell body and there are two extensions coming off the cell body. That's why it's bipolar. It has nothing to do with the disease, okay? It's just describing that there are two extensions from the cell body. These are not very common neurons, although we have plenty of them, okay? We have millions of them, but they are located only in the eye and in the nose. Number wise, we have like hundreds of millions of them, but maybe these are the only two places that we will have them. These are also sensory neurons. Then the third type, the multipolar neuron. This is the most common type. When we say neuron, that's what we are thinking of. Why do we have the cell body? That there are several dendrites, more than two, and there is an axon. So usually we have one axon and several dendrites. These are most common. These are found in the central nervous system and in the peripheral nervous system. These are found in the central nervous system. These types of neurons could be sensory and also could be motor neurons. And by the way, the axon of these multipolar neurons sometimes could be like 3 feet long. So not necessarily these are short neurons. No, some of them are really long. We have some of these neurons in our like L4, lumbar 4, okay, all the way to our toes. I will stop here. When we come back, we will talk about glial cells.